Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, December the 8th, 2025. In this video, I will of course be talking about today, Monday, what's going on astrologically and in terms of the I Ching. I also want to talk about Pete Hegseth, the Secretary for Defense. I mean, he's got a secondary title, I think, of Secretary for War. And, he has been in the news a great deal because of what has been going on in Venezuela. And he has taken a very hardline approach to the supposed narco-terrorists who are transporting drugs from Venezuela and perhaps other parts of South America to the United States. And as far as he's concerned, it's absolutely right to kill them, even if they're hanging on to boats, because it's potentially saving lives in the United States. Now, that is something I don't actually get. I find that really strange. And because if you're Trump or if you're a Republican, you believe in the markets, don't you? So what happens is if you are able to stop the supply of plant-based drugs, in particular cocaine, into the United States. I mean, there are other plant-based drugs, for example, heroin. You need coca leaves for cocaine. You need opium poppies for heroin. So if you stop the supply, the market works it out. And so what happens is the market finds an alternative supply, and that would be a synthetic. And the problem with synthetic equivalents or synthetic drugs like fentanyl, for example, is they tend to be a lot more dangerous than the original. So, of course, heroin is a dangerous drug, but it's nothing like as dangerous as fentanyl. I mean, fentanyl, if you've been in America, you get people who they stop their cars and their cars are revving and the car just stays there, and the person just passes out. And what is really killing people is a fentanyl epidemic. And why is there a fentanyl epidemic? And you could say one of the reasons is because it's cheaper and more effective to bring in fentanyl than heroin. I mean, boats. I mean, Trump may talk about fentanyl going into America via boats, but fentanyl is so massively toxic. I mean, it's something like, 50 times more toxic than cyanide. You don't need a boat to bring fentanyl into America. A drone will do it. One drone could probably bring in 1 million doses, and you do that sort of overland, perhaps across the border with Mexico or anywhere else, or maybe you import the precursor ingredients from China. So in fact, what the Americans are doing by attacking the drug boats is they're actually making it more profitable and a better alternative to bring fentanyl into the country. So in fact, you could say that rather than saving lives through killing these narco-terrorists, they're actually meaning that even more people are going to die because of fentanyl and other synthetics. Anyway, that's my view on the matter. But before I talk about the horoscope of Pete Hegseth, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, December the 8th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And as far as what is happening today, so here's the chart. Here's the chart for noon, New York time, and the moon is at 8 degrees Leo, and the moon goes into Leo, London time, at 2:48 a.m. So if you're in Europe, Africa, Western Asia, certainly the Americas, for pretty much all the day, except the very early hours, the moon will be in Leo. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon might not go into Leo until the early afternoon. So with the moon moving into Leo, that means we've now got 4 planets in fire signs. Got Sun, Venus, Mars in Sagittarius, and we've also now got Moon in Leo. So you could say that it's quite a fiery day. There's there's a lot of action. We can see things, we can understand how things link together, and we might therefore think that we can do something about it. We don't have to spend so long sort of working out what to do next. We can just go and do it. And also there aren't any planets in air signs except for Pluto in Aquarius. So maybe that means sort of less time procrastinating. And if we're trying to explain ourselves, well, perhaps we shouldn't try to explain ourselves. I mean, the air signs can like to explain themselves, like to sort of go into the details and go into the logic of something and think about alternative possibilities, but that's not really what this is about. I mean, I think the fire emphasis should really carry things through. All things being equal, of course, it might not be all things being equal, because there are other things going on that we perhaps need to consider. So what is happening is that, well, the moon, as soon as it moves into Leo, it makes an opposition to Pluto. So there is that moon opposition feel to today, and so that will be particularly at the beginning of the day. So it's not just moon in Leo, moon moves into Leo, everything's fine. To begin with, there might be a few concerns, a question of how far we can take things. But then the moon moves on, and it does make a trine to Venus. And that moon trine Venus is going to be, perhaps an important feature of the day. And moon in Leo, trine Venus in Sagittarius, that's a good aspect. It's a friendly aspect. I won't say it's a warm aspect, because it's not in water signs, but it's certainly friendly, and it's quite exciting. And it's not about necessarily the emotional connections with people, but instead how other people can excite each other and come up with plans. And well, when I say a plan, I'm not talking about the kind of plan that has to be sort of precisely drawn out. It's more a plan that comes of inspiration. And then sort of later in the day, the sun at 16-17 Sagittarius makes a semi-square to Pluto. So sun semi-square Pluto, that can be quite a heavy aspect, as you can imagine. The sun making this hard aspect to Pluto. So yeah, sure, there might be things we would like to do. We might be excited about it, but then we might be thinking about the consequences. And there is the question of, are we giving away too much power? So that's perhaps something to consider. Additionally, we have a square between Mars and Saturn. Now, I think in my next video, my video for Tuesday, I'll be looking at this Mars-Saturn square in detail. I mean, technically, if you're in the Americas, the Mars-Saturn square is I think this evening. But if you're not in the Americas, it won't be until tomorrow, Tuesday. But I think I'll be looking at the Mars-Saturn square on Tuesday. And just because it's not exact today, Monday, doesn't mean that it's not going to have an impact. And Mars-Saturn square, well, it can be quite a heavy influence. Mars in Sagittarius square Saturn in Pisces. Mars might like to do lots of things. It might have lots of inspirations, things happening. But then Saturn is saying, oh, maybe no, you can't do it. And some of us, as the day progresses, might start to feel quite frustrated, feel that we just can't get things done. There are all sorts of reasons why we can't. Now, that could be that we're putting our energies in the wrong area. I mean, that is often the case with Mars square Saturn. Or Mars square Saturn can be about a fear, a concern about what would happen if, and we don't want to take that final step because we're just worried about what might happen. And additionally, well, the Mars-Saturn pairing is sometimes connected with death, and so if we're thinking about death, well, that might just be what we think about. I mean, some of us, not all of us, probably a small minority, might be thinking about death more than usual, maybe. But Mars square Saturn, yeah, it is a difficult aspect, and I think that Mars square Saturn, just can be about what is happening, and there might be just a general pessimism with that Mars square Saturn, which sort of balances that Sagittarian emphasis. So, that Sagittarian emphasis, the moon in Leo, it really does seem to be going for it. Seems to be quite exciting, and we're thinking about all the things we can do. But then Mars square Saturn, and also to an extent Sun square Pluto, may put something of a damper on proceedings. Now, turning to the picture for Australia and New Zealand. So here's the positions of the planets for today, set for sort of noon Sydney, Australia. And at noon in Sydney, the moon is at 28 Cancer. So this afternoon the moon will move into Leo, and for most of the day the moon will be in Cancer, certainly the morning, early afternoon. And so the main lunar aspect might well be moon opposition Pluto rather than moon trine Venus. So maybe if you're in Australia and New Zealand, things might not be so active. It's that transitional time as the moon moves from one sign to another, and it is making the opposition to Pluto, and that moon trine Venus, which I think is a great aspect, perhaps is not going to make itself felt until this evening, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or Eastern Asia. And then there is the heliocentric picture. If we put the sun at the center of the solar system, so we get this chart. And just a reminder that Saturn and Neptune are now heliocentrically only 5 arc minutes away. So the heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction is pretty much exact now. And when you're talking about Saturn-Neptune's conjunctions, we're perhaps thinking about many of the things that are holding us back, that we're afraid of. And look at heliocentric Mars. Heliocentric Mars has just gone into Capricorn. So that means that what's happening today, and indeed at the beginning of a week, is that Mars is making a square to Saturn and it's making a square to Neptune. So that means that we have a geocentric Mars square Saturn. In fact, the way the week pans out is the week starts with Mars geocentrically, Mars square Saturn. It ends with Mars square Neptune, and that position is reflected in the heliocentric chart. By and large, not by and large, it is true, the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are all in positions which are reasonably close to their geocentric positions. And as you go further out, the positions get closer and closer. I mean, Mars is at 0 degrees Capricorn. It's still 10 degrees off its geocentric position, but the differences get closer as you go out. But so we've got Mars square Saturn, Mars square Neptune, both geocentrically and heliocentrically. But heliocentrically we get both the Mars square Saturn, Mars square Neptune very close to one another at the beginning of this week. So heliocentric Mars square Saturn, Mars square Neptune could indicate that the beginning of a week, and Monday even, is going to be difficult. Difficult not necessarily for us, but in terms of sentiment, how people are feeling, what people are worried about, the kind of events people experience. And I think that that is an important aspect. And matters are made slightly more complicated by the fact that Venus is also trining Saturn and Neptune. So we have got we've got four planets: Venus, Mars, Saturn, Neptune, sort of all coming together at the beginning of the sign. And that does intensify it. I mean, I know you might think that Venus trine Saturn, Venus trine Neptune are good aspects, but I think in a heliocentric chart, the concept of good or bad aspect is, not necessarily so valid. I think when you see Venus trine Saturn, Venus trine Neptune, maybe it's enough to say just that there is an aspect. So Venus, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune coming together, it may well be, well, it might be that Venus just adds fuel to the fire with that trine. I mean, you can try to make the most of it, and you might say Venus trine Saturn provides a degree of stability as far as getting on with people is concerned, but it just might add to the fear and how people respond to the fear. I'm not advocating, by the way, that we all live in fear, but it's something that about generally what is happening on the planet and what people are experiencing. Oh, and you can throw Uranus in as well, because Venus is opposition Uranus, heliocentrically. So heliocentrically, a fair amount going on, and I would have said that we are going to perhaps be aware of other people's concerns. Maybe not our concerns, but just the general vibe around us. So now I want to move to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, December the 8th, 2025. Aries. It's a kind of a mixed day. I mean, on one hand, you would just like to be yourself. You would maybe like to enjoy yourself, do whatever amuses you, in your own way, and do think hard about your own creativity. What you would what you would like to do, and it's something about you. It's not about other people with a moon in Leo. I mean, you can listen to other people, you can take other people into account to some extent, and you can maybe share. If you find something fun or amusing, maybe you can share what you're doing. But it's not a day for doing what another person wants. I don't think so. I think that if you were to try to accommodate other people, then Aries, I think you could start to feel very frustrated. It might just feel that things aren't happening. You feel annoyed. You feel annoyed with other people. Might feel annoyed with yourself. And one reason for this is that Mars, your ruler, is making a square to Saturn, and this square is okay. It's exact tomorrow if you're not in the Americas. It's exact this evening if you're in the Americas. If you are in the Americas, I'll be talking about this Mars square Saturn in detail, I think, in my video for Tuesday. But with this aspect, there's just something holding you back. And you want to explore, you want to do exciting, interesting things, but something is stopping you. And the question is, what is it? Now, it could be external events, might be people, things just happening that you hadn't fully anticipated. But do consider the possibility, Aries, that what is stopping you is you. Maybe your fears. You just don't know how things are going to develop, and you're worried about it. And then you might feel that you can't move forward, that you're stuck. And how do you deal with that? Well, one thing, Aries, that you could do is you could try to understand what your fears are, or rather understand what is actually holding you up. Now, your first impulse might be to think that it is something external holding you up. It's not your fault, it's not of your doing, but try to be reflective. Consider things about your own fears, your own past, your own concerns, and you might be tripping yourself up. You might, for example, be heading directly towards an obstacle. You almost might choose unconsciously to move towards to move down a road where there's a roadblock on it, where you could, if you wanted, you could take another road. but for some reason you might feel you have to hit this block. You have to have that conflict, where in fact you could just take a different road. You could take a different path, and and in the end, everything would be fine. And that also leads into this fact of choice. Very often with astrology, we have a choice. We can think about things in one way, we can think about things in another way. And Aries, do you want to be optimistic, or do you want to be pessimistic? Too much pessimism really doesn't suit you, Aries. I mean, the average Aries, it's a sign, but doesn't dwell on things for too long. You keep moving. So if one thing doesn't work, you keep moving. You move somewhere else, and so you have the capacity, Aries, to actually be positive. So you can have a positive frame of mind. You could have a negative frame of mind, and that Mars-Saturn square certainly could encourage negativity, but it's not the whole it's not the whole thing. And if you are positive and you can create a positive atmosphere, then things will move. And it's not just about building yourself up cognitively, it's also about what you're putting out and how other people are responding to you. And if you make, Aries, a special effort to make other people feel good, concentrate on the good things, try to avoid the bad things, then I think you'll be very much doing the right thing, and you'll find that people are really responding to you. And it just could be about looking up rather than down. You could get tangled up in the minutiae of everyday living, but that will be unsatisfactory, especially as there are no planets in Earth signs, unless you count Uranus in Taurus. Instead, try to focus on things from a higher level, seeing possibilities, looking at the future, the possibilities of the future, rather than perhaps the short-term challenges of the present. And if you take that wider view, Aries, then I think that today things can really fall into place. Though that Mars square Saturn, I'm not saying it should be ignored, especially on a physical level. It can make you too hasty, particularly if you're feeling angry, or you might do something which is a step too far. And, you do look after yourself, physically, and don't act out of anger. Instead, try and reframe the situation and start to see the positives, and start to see the capacity for free movement. And I think that's a good way around that Mars-Saturn square. Taurus. One aspect that we do have today, Taurus, is a sesquiquadrate between Venus and Jupiter. I mean, this aspect is at the beginning of the day. I think perhaps if you're in the Americas, you might not feel it much, if at all. But with this Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter, well, in fact, this Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter, I mean, it is quite marginal. Unless you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia. But this Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter, it might encourage you, particularly at the beginning of the day, to overdo things, to take something too far, to feel that you have to do something. But I don't think that is necessarily the case. And Venus sesquiquadrate Jupiter can be about indulgence, perhaps spending too much money, or getting too emotional about something, or trying to get too emotional. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. And for most of the day, all the day, if you're in Australia and if you're in the Americas, the moon is in Leo, and I think that has a bit of a defining impact. So with the moon in Leo, it's quite low profile, all things being equal, but it does make a trine to Venus, and of course Venus is your ruler. So moon trine Venus is a pleasant aspect, and with this trine between moon and Venus, you can just do things your way. If you do things your way, then I don't think that anything can go wrong. Things should unfold quite smoothly, and you'll be sensitive enough. I mean, it's difficult to be completely sensitive today, but you can to some extent, and you have a certain understanding of sort of hidden realities, things that maybe some people are not revealing, but you don't want to take things too far. You don't want to really go anywhere you've never been before. So if possible, keep it familiar, because even familiar things can be complicated. I mean, things are not necessarily going to be simple, but just because something is complicated, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it requires a bit of effort. It just requires you to really understand what is happening. And how do you understand what's going on? Well, the best way of understanding something is to give yourself the time and the space, and not allow yourself to be pressured by other people. Do it your way, and I think that things can run pretty smoothly. Now, Venus is linked up with Mercury and Mars. Now, that might not seem immediately obvious, but if you look at the chart, you'll see that Venus is in the middle of Mercury and Mars. Venus is about 13, 14 degrees from Mercury and 14 degrees from Mars. So we can say that Venus is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. So with Venus on the Mercury-Mars midpoint, that does give you the capacity to express yourself. You're capable of plain speaking. And if something is not to your satisfaction, you are able to communicate this fact. Because, Mercury-Mars as a pair is about verbal action, expressing your annoyance verbally, perhaps getting involved in an argument, or maybe having a vigorous discussion. Now, you're not really in the mood for talking to lots of different people, going out there into the world, making a lot of noise, shouting, and so on. But if you are challenged, or there is something that is annoying you, then I think that you are capable of really giving a good account of yourself. But don't feel that everything is worth your effort. You should perhaps be thinking of less rather than more, as far in terms of other people, relationships, your social life. You want to have fewer people around you, and it might occur to you that certain relationships are simply surplus to requirement, at least in the short term. So Taurus, if you want to distance yourself from other people, that might not be such a bad thing. You're not necessarily saying goodbye forever. It may be just something temporary, though if any kind of relationship has run its course, then I think that you'll be very aware of it. And if you want to create some kind of an ending, then I think you can. And another reason to be ever so slightly careful in terms of relationships in your social life is the fact that Mars is making a square to Saturn, and Mars is ruler of your 7th house, of your opposite sign, Scorpio. And so Mars does say something about other people, and because Mars is square Saturn, that might indicate that some people are more trouble than they're worth. They could be problematic. They might be annoyed about something. They might be stubborn. They might dump their own problems onto you, and is that really what you want? In most cases, probably not. I mean, okay, if someone is really close to you, by all means be there for them. I think in your own way you can have quite a healing impact, But if trying to heal someone, trying to look after someone else's problems, trying to listen to other people's problems can be exhausting. And I think that you have the capacity to listen and to have a healing effect, but yeah, it could be exhausting, and you might decide that that's just not something you want to bother with. And so that Mars square Saturn might be another good reason for steering clear of difficult social and interpersonal situations. Gemini. So today the moon is moving into Leo, and moon moving into Leo from a Gemini perspective, isn't so bad. I mean, the moon in Leo, that's quite an easygoing sign for the moon to be in, at least from a Gemini perspective. And I think that you're going to find it relatively easy to communicate. You can say what's on your mind. I mean, you don't have to be controversial about it. You don't have to be. I mean, it depends, doesn't it? And there is a sort of mixed messaging today. But if you just want to focus on Moon trine Venus, just tell yourself Moon is trine Venus. Venus is in Sagittarius, your opposite sign. And if you just want to talk about stuff which is pretty low key, you don't want to get involved in serious subjects. I mean, you might want to get involved in serious subjects, but that's a different matter. But if you want to keep it simple, keep it trivial, you could just decide to avoid anything serious, and in that way you can get on really well with other people, and you can really make the most of their company, but just don't allow things to get to a stage where you're dealing with sort of heavy material. That's possibly not what you want, but not definitely so. And it all depends on what you want to focus on. And one aspect that we have today is a square between Mars and Saturn. Okay, this Mars square Saturn might be exact tomorrow, but yeah, there is a square between Mars and Saturn. And so if you think about it, you've got Mars in Sagittarius, which is your opposite sign. You've got Saturn in Pisces, which is another mutable sign, and it's a very high profile sign. And that Mars square Saturn, which runs through into tomorrow, and I'll be talking about this aspect in more detail in my video for Tuesday. We could see it as you trying to make progress. There are things you take seriously, and it's right that you take things seriously, and that's good. But then Mars squares Saturn, what does that mean? It could be that another person is acting as an irritant. They are holding you up. They're making it more difficult for you to proceed. And so what happens in that situation? I mean, is it an avoidable situation? So it might be, for example, that things are fine in most areas of your life, but in certain important areas, perhaps in your career or in your attempts to get something together, to create something that is important to you and your ambitions, whatever those ambitions might be, it might be difficult to get agreement, and one person might have a different view, and the question is, what do you do about it? And do you just sweep it all under the carpet, or do you address the situation head on? Well, you're a Gemini, and Geminis do like to avoid the issue very often. They just like to hope that the issue will go away. And sometimes that approach is right. If you think that someone is going to be a problem, if they're going to create trouble, if they're going to criticize you, then maybe you should stay out of their way. Or maybe you could just wait for Mars to move out of Sagittarius and to wait for it to move into Capricorn. Maybe things will be easier when Mars moves into Capricorn. I mean, I think that you could say, well, Mars is making an opposition to your ascendant or your sun or your moon, whatever it is, and if you take a whole sign view, then Mars will be making that opposition throughout its whole passage through Sagittarius. So you wait for Mars to move into Capricorn on when is that, on Monday of next week, in a week's time, and then things might be easier. So if you're thinking about some sort of conflict where someone needs to be faced, or there's someone serious out there who you need to confront, or maybe now is not necessarily the right time to do it. So that's one way of looking at this world. Looking at today. Another approach is that Gemini, in your own way, at the moment, you are actually quite optimistic. You're thinking about what could happen. Indeed, you might not just be optimistic, but you might be idealistic. You might feel that things really could work out if you just allowed it all to happen, if you were given a chance. And the word faith comes to mind. There are things that you could have faith in. You could sort of believe that certain things really are possible, and you're not quite sure how it's going to happen, but you don't want to have too many doubts right now. I mean, you could have doubts. I mean, Geminis often do have an issue with faith, because faith requires a sort of a suspension of critical thinking, almost. I believe that it's going to be fine, and I don't want you to be naive, but you've got to give yourself a chance. You've got to give your optimism some chance. And I think if you do, then I don't think your optimism is going to be contradicted, even though there is this Mars square Saturn. But perhaps what you don't want to do is just get yourself into a difficult situation with that Mars square Saturn, and then that might make you feel negative, and your faith might not be returned. Your faith might seem like a hiding to nothing. So perhaps short term, Gemini, a bit of avoidance might be a good idea. I mean, I'm not saying you can avoid anything forever, but if you see a potential conflict or a disagreement, maybe it's just best to sidestep the whole thing. Cancer. There may well, Cancer, be times today and perhaps into tomorrow where you have to make sure that everything is in order, that you have what is required to see things through. I mean, you kind of know what you need to do. You know what you want, but the question is, are you able to proceed? And it's possible, Cancer, that you haven't got everything you need. You have ideas, you have plans, you have projects, but if you were to proceed with them right now, you might not get very far. Now, I'm not being negative there. I'm just telling you that there might be some work required. You need to gather what you need, and I think, Cancer, you very much know where to go. So it's not like a hopeless task. It's instead a situation where you just need to give yourself time to bring everything together, and that's definitely something you can do. And as the day progresses, we got Moon moving towards a trine to Venus, and tomorrow we're going to have a moon making trine to the Sun. Now that Moon trine Venus, Moon trine Sun, those two aspects are certainly fortunate, but I don't think they're quite as dramatic as they sound. It's not necessarily all about excitement or getting exactly what you want. It's rather you knowing what you need to do. That's where the intuition lies. The intuition is not in terms of suddenly knowing where to find it. It's rather knowing exactly what you need to do, exactly what steps are required, and if you go through those steps in a way that is very motivated, but also there is an intuition to it, just an intuition of just knowing how to put something together. I mean, maybe it's like putting together, I don't know, some IKEA piece of furniture. You have to very often one has to sort of agonize over the instructions, and the instructions often don't have any words in them, and you just have to make assumptions about the pictures, and that can be hard work. But you, Cancer, I don't think you're going to have too many problems in that department. I'm not suggesting, by the way, but you put together pieces of IKEA furniture. I'm not saying that would necessarily work out, but if you are having to just do something and create a situation which allows you to see your plans through, yeah, you'll know what's missing. Just intuitively, it's a natural process. And one question you might be asking yourself, Cancer, is how much help do you need? Is it worth the effort bringing other people in if you don't have to? And I would say, Cancer, that the answer might be no. Other people might appear to be available. A particular person might appear to be available. You might look at that moon trine Venus and say, well, that's a nice aspect as far as relationships are concerned, about getting on with people. But on the other hand, there could be frustrations if you bring people in, and you might think that getting help is going to allow you to do things more quickly, going to help you, create the preconditions for success. But you might find that if you do get anyone involved in what you're doing, it just makes things longer, and then you're looking for assistance, and then you might have to deal with another person's frustrations, and is that really what you want? And so possibly, Cancer, the best strategy is to just do things on your own. You know what needs to be done, you go ahead, you do it, and then I think that you should be quite successful about it. Leo, Moon is edging into your sign. In fact, if you're in the Americas, then last night, Sunday evening, I think the Moon would have gone into Leo. If you're in Australia, if you're in Europe or Africa, then very early in the morning, Moon moves into Leo. The same for sort of West Asia, the Middle East. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, okay, it might not be until the early afternoon that the Moon moves into Leo. But one way or another, the Moon is moving into Leo, and so with the Moon moving into your sign, it gives you more of an impetus to do stuff, to make things happen, and you could be quite intent about it, because the Moon, when it does move into Leo, it makes an opposition to Pluto. I mean, that's the first aspect that happens, Moon opposition Pluto, and you might be a little bit uncertain of yourself to begin with as the Moon makes that sign transition. What is holding you back? Who is holding you back? Are you really able to see things through? But then the Moon moves on, and it makes a trine to Venus, and your Moon trine Venus is an aspect that is pretty fortunate. These two sort of reflective planets in fire signs in good aspect with each other, and that might mean, Leo, that you can really be aware of yourself and what you can do. You get a real idea about your overall capacity. And if you take a spontaneous approach, I think that is the best approach. It's not a day, Leo, for endless analysis. It's also not a day for getting obsessed about small details. Not really. There can be all sorts of reasons why you can't act if you just look at surface appearances, or if you think about something too much. But it's all nonsense, and you have to think about what you want to do and where the spirit takes you. And if you follow the spirit, and I don't necessarily mean that in a spiritual sense, it's just where your intuition is telling you to go, then, Leo, things move, things move quickly, and most importantly, you can do something that you really enjoy, that you get great pleasure from. And so absolutely don't doubt yourself. And yeah, the moon is making a trine to the sun. Okay, that trine to the sun doesn't happen until tomorrow, but when you've got the moon in Leo and the sun in Sagittarius, you can pick up that moon-sun relationship, and it is a reminder that the sun, your ruler, is in Sagittarius. It's a time for going beyond. It's that time of year when you shouldn't be stuck in one place, that you shouldn't be narrow-minded. You just need to think about all the possibilities, and those possibilities are very much out there, and that's looking at things from a fairly straightforward perspective. And things might be helped by the fact that you're in your own way, you're quite attractive. You come over as being a sympathetic person. There's nothing discordant about you, and because people like you, and I think in many cases they're going to trust you. Perhaps they'll pick up on the constancy of Leo. That's just going to make things a lot easier. And so do focus on the ease. Don't focus on the difficulties. Could you focus on the difficulties? Okay, you could, and that is possibly something I need to talk about later on in the week. I mean, we do have a Mars-Saturn square, and it's true. The Mars-Saturn square might be exact today if you're in the Americas. This Mars-Saturn square, and it is an important aspect, and the question is, how much is that aspect going to influence you? It could. You might decide to make things difficult for yourself. You might, with Mars and Sagittarius, nice place to Mars from a Leo viewpoint, but you might decide to hold yourself up, maybe for some emotional reason. It's Mars square Saturn in Pisces. You might decide to deliberately make things difficult for yourself, but I don't think you should. Maybe there's a choice here, but if something is working, then just keep going on it. Sure, you might have your doubts, but I think those doubts have to be ignored. Maybe the Mars-Saturn square should be ignored, and if you don't want to have Mars-Saturn in your life, perhaps you should make sure that you hang around with the right people. And with Mars square Saturn, some people could be a problem. Some people could be angry. They could be frustrated, and they might take that anger and frustration out on you. So if something is important to you, you enjoy doing it, make sure you get support, and make sure that you don't need support. But if you have people around you, make sure they are supportive of what you're doing, because maybe not everyone is going to be supportive. So perhaps make your choices. If in doubt, then you're quite capable of doing things on your own. You don't need anyone to be with you in order to achieve your creative goals. Virgo, you believe, Virgo, that in the end things are going to be okay, and this faith might not seem particularly Virgoan. I mean, Virgoans obviously have a reputation for focusing on those small details, the details that can grind everything to a halt. And that can happen. But if you look at what's going on today, there are no planets in Earth signs unless you count Uranus, and that might seem a bit unusual. Well, it's not unusual at the moment, but for a Virgo, you need something usually you need something to hold on to, but do you really need something to hold on to? It might be okay, Virgo, to just have a belief that in the end everything is going to be okay. It doesn't matter what things seem to be like, on the surface. It doesn't matter what you're hearing, for example, from other people. It shouldn't matter. And if you're able to believe in yourself, then I think there's a good chance that really, everything works out there. And, maybe it's a good idea to be quite self-sufficient. I'm actually saying this for quite a lot of the signs. I am advocating self-sufficiency, because if you have to bring someone else in, if you have to rely on another person, well, that could spoil things. Especially when we've got Mars square Saturn. Mars square Saturn, it is a difficult aspect. It's an aspect that quite possibly impacts you directly, and it could be, if you allow it, it could be a situation where you are frustrated by events which are completely beyond your control. You may be talking about difficult people, a lot of difficult people around, but you don't have to allow them to get in your way with this Mars square Saturn. This Mars square Saturn is not, it's not just a one-day wonder. This aspect, it's also going to be strong, tomorrow. Well, you might even say that it kind of dominates a whole week, but it's right now when that Mars square Saturn is exact that you might be feeling it if you allow yourself to feel it. And I think you'll know when Mars-Saturn is operating, because you'll see that people and events are trying to be disruptive. They're trying to disrupt what is important to you. When the reality is, Virgo, you can have faith. You can believe that things can happen in your own quiet way. There is nothing to discuss. So if you have an idea, something you want to do, it's not a great idea day because we've got only Pluto in air signs. But if you just feel, or you have this intuition that things can work out if you give yourself the chance, then stay with it. And you don't necessarily have to tell anyone what's on your mind. If you were to tell someone what was on your mind or what you were hoping for, then you might just get mindless criticism. You might be dragged down by another person telling you you're being naive. But there is a place for naivety. That's often where great things start, being naive. And okay, later on you can work out the details. But if you believe that something is possible, then Virgo. And I'm talking about something positive. If you feel that something positive and life-affirming is possible, then Virgo, I'm really confident that it can actually happen. Libra, don't take things too seriously. Do what you enjoy. Have fun. Don't complicate things. Don't mix with complicated people. I think that's the best approach. And you can benefit from the fact that the moon is in Leo. It's making a trine to Venus, and the moon, having made that trine to Venus, tomorrow it will make a trine to the sun. And I think that you can just go with the flow. And you don't have to, think too much, worry too much. Don't analyze. If something is working, then stick with it. And ideally, Libra, you will avoid things that are complicated. Instead, just stick with the present. And I think it's a great day for idle conversation, and try as hard as you can to keep things simple. In most cases, that's the easiest way to manage whatever's going on today. Now, is it necessarily going to work out like that? Well, no. The reality is that you might want to make things complicated. You might not intend to make things complicated, but you might decide that you want to go beyond, for example, a casual conversation and get into something more serious. You're quite capable of showing your annoyance, expressing your opinions. You could if you wanted to. If you want a quiet day, I wouldn't recommend it. But once you get going on something, once you decide that something is important, you're not going to wait. You're not going to make a special effort to keep everything balanced. You want to perhaps even upset the balance, and that is a Libran question, isn't it? I mean, do you want to maintain the balance, or do you want to destroy it? And probably most Librans are going to want to maintain the balance, in which case stay away from anything controversial, keep it simple, even keep it trivial. But if something annoys you, if you notice something, if you want to say something, say something controversial, if you want to show a bit of annoyance, anger, well, yeah, you can. And your verbal skills are particularly good. And your verbal skills are good at all levels. You're good at small talk. You're also good at getting angry. You're also good at expressing verbal annoyance. Of course, if you start expressing verbal annoyance, well, one thing, might lead to another. You can certainly express yourself very well and very powerfully. And if need be, you can bring things to a conclusion. And what does it mean to bring things to a conclusion? It could be about an ending. It might be that you have had enough of someone. Now, if you've had enough of someone, then it's perhaps a great time to create an ending. But again, do you want to get involved with the complication? As I said at the beginning of this piece, it can be a really easy day, really straightforward. Everything runs smoothly and harmoniously. Just get into that moon trine Venus. That's definitely an option for you. But Libra, it may not be an option that you want to take. And the more seriously you take things, the more seriously they become. And one aspect we have today is Mars square Saturn. Okay, this aspect may not be until tomorrow. It depends on your time zone. But Mars square Saturn says a lot about some other people. Mars square Saturn could represent someone who is difficult, who is frustrated, who perhaps wants to take their frustrations out on you. It's possible. So if you know such a person, probably best to avoid them. Or if you really feel you want to confront them, you can. I don't think I'd recommend it, but if you want to, get someone out of your life, then yeah, that is a possibility, and that's quite a complicated action to take. And there is that question. I mean, do you want to make things so complicated? And so, Libra, what I'm kind of suggesting is that today you have a certain amount of choice. What kind of day do you want? Do you want to just sail through the day, enjoy small things, enjoy other people's company, not dwell on anything complicated? Yeah, that's something you can do. But if you want to go into something that might be sort of darker, more intense, perhaps more productive, then Libra, that is certainly an option. Scorpio, we can't really avoid a square aspect between Mars and Saturn. And this Mars-Saturn square has been brewing for some time, and now it's exact. It might be exact, this evening if you're in this evening if you're in the Americas, or exact tomorrow if you're not. I will be talking a lot more about this Mars-Saturn square, but it can't be avoided. It does have to be mentioned. And so if you've got Mars square Saturn, it might well be, Scorpio, that there are things that are really annoying you, that you don't you don't like, and you might feel that you really want to express that annoyance. I mean, different things. Well, it could be money. Money is always a possible issue at the moment. We've got 3 planets in Sagittarius. Those 3 planets, Sun, Venus, Mars, they're all moving to a square of Saturn. They'll all make that square of Saturn over the next few weeks. First you get Mars square Saturn, then I think you get Sun square Saturn, then finally Venus square Saturn, or maybe it's the other way around. But so you've got those 3 aspects coming up, and today or tomorrow, that first aspect, and perhaps the most important one, because Mars is your ruler, making that square aspect to Saturn. Yeah, there could be something something just annoys you. It could be to do with money, and maybe you'll be thinking about money more than usual. And if something happens in a financial sense that you don't like, you don't approve of, that you feel it's threatening, then you might want to do something about it. Maybe you should do something about it. You don't want to, keep quiet about it. Although I don't think that you need to take things too far. I think that you're able to get a kind of a balance right. You can certainly express your annoyance, but you're able to wrap that annoyance up in some fairly pleasant wrapping. You're able to use the right words. You can be critical of people, but you can also be supportive, and you can be optimistic. When you're in the middle of a rather frustrating situation, you can see beyond everything, and that you have choices. You have cognitive choices. You can decide what to focus on, what really defines your thinking. So if you make a special effort to be optimistic, I think that can really have a big impact. It can blunt that Mars-Saturn square, and you have to regard that Mars-Saturn square perhaps as something temporary. It's not the whole thing. It's not describing your life. It's not describing even the next month. It's just some frustration that needs to be got in perspective. And with that Mercury-Saturn square, you can make yourself feel good, but you can also make other people feel good, even if you are being critical. So just because you're criticizing someone, it doesn't mean that you have to really sort of put them down and make them upset and spoil the day, spoil the month, even spoil the end of the year. It's not like that. You have to always give someone a bit of positivity, even if the overall message appears to be negative. You can always end things on a positive note, and that does mean that perhaps you're able to deal with quite heavy issues, but in a way that you have a light touch at the end. And at the same time, we have got a trine between Moon and Venus, and this Moon Venus trine, maybe that's what we should be focusing on. I mean, a Moon trine Venus is one of the most important aspects of the day, and as far as you're concerned, it's pretty positive. It's about you thinking about what you want, how you're going to achieve it, and also getting rewarded for it. So if you feel you need to be rewarded, Scorpio, then I think that you can be. Yeah, I know that money could be an issue. It could lead to arguments. Where there's a financial discussion, there's always a possibility of a financial argument. But at the same time, particularly if you're working or you're doing anything that has a financial reward, then I think you can sort of maneuver yourself into the right position, and you can get what you're looking for. So I think the day on the surface appears to have some real frustrations, real annoyances regarding money, for example, but it doesn't that needn't define the day. And if you think about what you are trying to achieve, what you want from the day, then I think you can get it, and you can get it, in a way that is perhaps easier than expected. And even if you're dealing with people you disagree with, even if you're being critical of them, you can just provide them with just a bit of positivity. And I think it's a positive approach that will help you get through the day. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, I know, well, it's positive this and positive that, and one can be far too positive, but I really do mean that. I think that a bit of positivity and enthusiasm can certainly go a long way. Sagittarius. There is at the moment a square between Mars and Saturn, and this Mars-Saturn square will be around tomorrow. So it's not just about today, but I think I need to mention it. And one reason I need to mention this Mars-Saturn square is because it involves Sagittarius. Your sign. Mars in Sagittarius is square Saturn it's about you trying to plow on, trying to make progress, being optimistic and enthusiastic, and then Mars makes a square to Saturn. And with this Mars square Saturn, there might be things holding you up that may be annoying. Maybe you have to spend too much time, or at least it seems like too much time, worrying, for example, about what's happening at home or what your family are doing. And Sagittarians do appreciate their freedom, and sort of ties of responsibility and obligation can sometimes be really annoying. It's not what you wanted, but sometimes you just have to accept the situation. And so that might say something about today, that you need to take your obligations and responsibilities with good grace, and not get annoyed about them, not do things begrudgingly. I think you could, if you're asked to do something you don't want to do, yeah, you might do it, but you won't do it gracefully. At least your inclination will be to not do it gracefully. But I would suggest that you try as far as possible to do everything with good humor and with a good spirit, and don't let your home and family get you down, but also don't resent your home and family. That it's there for a reason. It's giving you security, and sometimes the thing that makes you most secure is the thing that makes you feel most annoyed. And always focus on what is good. There is a wonderful aspect between the moon and Venus today. And today we've got moon trine Venus, moon in Leo, trine Venus in Sagittarius. Tomorrow we've got moon in Leo, trine the sun in Sagittarius. So the moon is really working for you at the moment. And the next time the moon is in Leo, the sun won't be in Sagittarius anymore. It will be in Capricorn. So this precise trine is not going to happen for another year. So perhaps you should really make the most of it. And moon in Leo, Sagittarius is inviting you to go further, to go above and beyond, not to get sort of caught up in the minutiae of everyday living. There's not much scope for anything useful to happen at that kind of material level. You need to move up, see the broad picture, and you can see the broad picture. And once you see the broad picture, you kind of see where everything is going. Then you realize that really things aren't so bad, and perhaps you can get over any feelings you might have of negativity, and there is some negativity around. I think some Sagittarians might be aware of things going on behind the scenes which just seem heavy and dangerous and threatening. And, the question is, what is that about? It's quite a collective feeling. It might feel very personal, that it's you personally being threatened, and that might sort of colour your view of the day. Not just today. We're not talking about anything particularly short term. Just certainly over the next few days. And what's happening, Sagittarius, is that you're just picking up on something collective, the worries of all of us. And it might feel very real. Yeah, it might feel very personal, but I don't think it is. And so you want to kind of make a distinction there. And so don't get too caught up on those feelings of negativity, because I just don't think they're personal, and maybe it's a good thing. I mean, if you are picking up on what's happening in the world, what the world is like, what people are worried about, people's fears, if you're picking up on all of that, then that makes you better informed, provided you get things in perspective and you just don't take things personally. And with that approach, that allows you to enjoy the day and get a perspective. If you're right down at ground level, you'll have no perspective. But if you can see everything and see yourself as just one person amongst many, just think about the planet and think about how we're all impacted by these broader collective trends. I do think that for you today, that will make things easier. Capricorn. The aspect that really can't be avoided at the moment is a square between Mars and Saturn. Of course it matters, the fact that Mars is square Saturn. Today, tomorrow, Mars square Saturn. Saturn is your ruler. And so we might see Mars square Saturn as an annoyance. Saturn represents you. Mars represents just something that is aggravating. And the question is, what is that annoyance about? It's absolutely possible that annoyance is other people. People can be annoying. You have to deal with them. You have to deal with their problems. They're irritating. They take up your time. And that may be potentially your experience of a day. It doesn't have to be your experience of a day, but it certainly could be. But you perhaps have to see things at a broader level. Mars in Sagittarius. Well, Mars in Sagittarius might not be anything to do with the external world. I mean, Mars is getting ready to move into Capricorn, by the way. I hope you're looking forward to that. I mean, I think it's December the 15th that Mars moves into Capricorn. I think that's going to be great. I mean, Mars moves into its sign of its exaltation. That, from your perspective, is going to be very dynamic, but it's not there yet. We've got, a week or so, maybe more than a week. Is that right? We got about a week before Mars moves into Capricorn. But while Mars is in the last decan of Sagittarius, it just could be a time when the annoyances you're feeling don't necessarily have an external source. It could be a build-up in terms of your experiences, what you're feeling, perhaps what you're believing, and this could create a certain anger, an anger you might want to blame on other people, you might want to pin on other people, but I don't think you have to, and I don't think it would be wise. I think, Capricorn, you need to be realistic and self-aware, and always consider your own role in something before putting a blame on someone else. I mean, it's always easy to think that there is blame, That if something bad happens, someone's got to be blamed. It's just someone's fault, but maybe it's just no one's fault. It's just the way it is. And as I said, don't forget, Mars is about to move into Capricorn. Just got a week left, and I also Capricorn. I do get that today might be ever so slightly complicated. Things won't necessarily be completely easy, and you might have to look at things again and again. And looking at things at a surface level might not be something that is going to be very useful. But if you can really make a special effort to understand things and ask yourself deep questions about your own motivations, then I think that that's just going to make things easier. You're going to be more self-aware, and at the same time, that could help in terms of some of the things you're working on. So if you are working on things, perhaps might be relating to your work, then the surface appearances are going to tell you very little. But if you're prepared to dig down and really deeply understand, what is happening, you might be able to find the gold. You might be able to find something that is really important, and there might be moments of awareness where through some of the frustrations you just start to see it all. So that is a positive. Now, there is that Mars square Saturn. There are some negative sides to that Mars square Saturn, as I've just been saying. But if we were to look at Mars square Saturn in the worst case, well, Mars can be aggravation. It could be accidents, something like that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but maybe Capricorn over the next couple of days, you need to take it easy. Don't do anything risky. Stick to the straight and narrow, and that might be the best way of getting through this aspect. Aquarius. I keep having to talk about an aspect between Mars and Saturn. I don't think I want to say very much about the Mars-Saturn square today. I'm going to talk about it again tomorrow. But suffice it to say that, Saturn is your ruler. Mars is currently making a square to Saturn. And it just might be, Aquarius, that there are things out there that are annoying. Some people can be annoying. What kind of people can be annoying? Maybe the kind of people that you don't know well enough to be able to forgive their mistakes. Forgiveness sometimes requires a bit of knowledge. You're capable of, what someone can do, how people get things wrong. So if you know them well enough, they make a mistake, you're able to forgive them because you can say, well, that's just a side of their personality, that's just who they are. On the other hand, if you don't know someone well, they might be a sort of a friend or an acquaintance, but you don't really know the full details. They do something unexpected, and it's easy to blame them, but I think that should perhaps be avoided, although maybe people you don't know well should be steered clear from. So it's not a day for casual acquaintances. On the other hand, we do have the moon in a Leo, so the moon is in your opposite sign, and so with the moon in your opposite sign, we might be thinking about relationships, how you get on with other people, not just any other people, but again, people well. And the moon is making a trine to Venus. I mean, there are two aspects involving the moon. There are others, but the aspects I wanted to just focus on is moon opposition Pluto and moon trine Venus. Now, that moon opposition Pluto, you're not going to really feel that in the Americas. You probably are going to feel it if you're in Australia and New Zealand. So if you're in Australia and New Zealand or Eastern Asia, then relationships might seem rather intense, and there might be an air of conflict there. On the other hand, if you're in the Americas, I think that you'll be focusing more on that moon trine Venus, and In Europe, you're kind of transitioning from moon opposition Pluto to moon trine Venus, and as a day progresses, you'll get more and more of that moon trine Venus. And I think that moon trine Venus Aquarius is going to sort of allow you to be nice to the people that matter in your life, and they can be nice to you, and there can be a feeling of comfort and also a bit of excitement, because this moon trine Venus is, it's in fire signs, not in air signs. Air signs can just be too much. Air signs can be just too much thinking, too much talking, and you're asking where is it going. But there aren't any planets in air signs at the moment, unless you count Pluto in Aquarius. So the right relationship, if you understand the person well enough, I think it can be exciting, and can make you feel good, and at the same time, you are quite capable of making other people feel good. You really can. I mean, I know there's a Mars square. I know we've got Mars square Saturn, and we can be very negative about it. But if you want to make the effort to cheer someone up, to recast a situation, then I can. And when I say recast a situation, you might have something that is very neutral, but it can't be judged one way or another. Now, it's possible you can take something neutral and make it look really dark and negative, or you can take the opposite approach. You can focus on the positives, and I don't think it's naive to focus on the positives. I think that's what you have to do, and I think that's what you can do, and through that you can make yourself feel optimistic, and also you can make other people feel optimistic as well. Pisces. The big aspect we have, or one big aspect we've got at the moment, is Mars square Saturn, and this square between Mars and Saturn, it really dominates the beginning of the week. And when you think about Mars square Saturn, you might think that this aspect is very negative, but I don't think there's any reason to see this aspect as being negative if you're a Pisces. Because this aspect for you, Pisces, can be really very motivating. It allows you to think about what is important to you, and what you'd like to achieve. And if you give it your best, even if it's difficult, even if it's a real grind, then Pisces, I think that you can really cover a lot of ground. And it may be your grinding, relentless approach that gets you results. And might not be easy. I don't think it is going to be an easy day. But it's not going to be a wasted day. It needn't be a wasted day. So what is it? What is it you want to do today? What would you like to get off the ground? And in a way, the more difficult it is, the better. So if you have some task that you really want to put into action, now might be the time to do it. And your relentlessness is going to be what makes the difference, perhaps, between success and failure. Now, we don't normally associate the word relentless with the sign Pisces, but Saturn is in your sign, and Saturn is making a square to Mars in Sagittarius. So keep going, keep pushing, and at the same time, don't leave any stones unturned. It is a day when you need to be thinking about, the details, and it takes time. It's not a day for just rushing through. Just stop, do what's necessary, and you will know what's necessary. You don't even have to think about what's necessary. It'll all be very clear. And so trust your intuition to see you through, and in your own in a grinding but intuitive way, you really do make a lot of progress. You can make a huge amount of progress. So I'm not saying it's going to be a fun day, by the way. I don't think it will be a fun day, but I'm really confident that it can be very productive. And additionally, Pisces, you're going to be able to deal with difficult things that maybe you can't normally deal with, or you don't normally want to deal with, or things that other people are afraid of, but you can handle it. You can look things straight on. No neglect. You're not going to look the other way. You're not going to pretend that something doesn't exist. You know what you're dealing with, and with that gritty, realistic approach, Pisces, I think it could be a great Monday. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it is time to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 58, which is the joyous. And this hexagram doesn't move. No moving lines. And, because there are no moving lines, that may say something about today. Regardless of what the hexagram is, it just could be a day where things aren't moving. We have a broad sense of what's happening today, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, but where is the action? And that might mean that it could be a quiet Monday, could be a disappointing Monday. It seems that there might be potential here, but where exactly is it going? Doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Now, the joyous is a rather sort of misleading hexagram. It seems good. The Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, calls it the joyous. So that gives us the idea of enjoying ourselves, being happy, and that's further supported by the trigrams. So the trigram, we've got two trigrams, one above the other. So a trigram is 3 lines, and so these 3 lines, they represent the lake. So you've got a lake over a lake. And so the lake, it's one aspect of water. There are other aspects of water in the I Ching, for example, the abyss. But this isn't the abyss, it's the lake. And the lake is pleasant. It's enjoyable. And it certainly is. And I think that we may well feel that we can enjoy ourselves, that we can relax, we can get into the spirit of things. We can just go with the flow, because it's a very watery hexagram, the joyous. But there is some danger here that we get overwhelmed by it all, and it's we do go with the flow. We get into the spirit of the things, the whole thing. We just forget what we're trying to achieve. We forget what we're trying to do. We get carried away by what other people are doing. And if you think about it in terms of the lake, you think you think about the water. You get into the water, and lakes are supposed to be fairly tranquil, but maybe there's a tide coming in. So we're not just thinking about the lake. We may be thinking about the sea. When you get the tide coming in, you might get caught up in the tide, and you might find yourself going somewhere or being dragged somewhere you just don't want to go. And so it's important that, we can have a good day. We can enjoy ourselves, but we've got to hold firm. We must start the day thinking about, what are we trying to achieve? What's this day about? And then when we do get involved with whatever is going on, what other people are presenting ourselves with, we keep in mind our priorities. So you've got to keep in mind your priorities all the time. You must not get swept up in things. Don't get involved strongly with other people's enjoyment. Might be that we're all getting into the Christmas spirit, but no, it's not a time to be getting into the Christmas spirit. You can watch the Christmas spirit, but it's not a time to be partaking, at least mind, body and soul. You need to have some detachment here, and I think that is the main theme of this hexagram. You can enjoy yourself, but absolutely up to a limit, and you have to think about your main priorities. Now we have a nuclear hexagram. And the nuclear hexagram, this is the hexagram underlying the hexagram. And so the nuclear hexagram of this, and I look at the nuclear hexagram when I don't have any moving lines, and the nuclear hexagram here is hexagram number 37, which is the family. And this might actually be what our priority should be: the family. The people we know, the people we trust, the people we're with all the time may not literally be our family, our group, our clan, perhaps a group of close friends, whatever your situation, the thing that is important to you. And that's what matters. And it's very important not to lose touch with that. And so that's what we might get swept away from. And the family, it represents security. And if we just keep that in mind, that that's where our responsibilities should lie, then I think that we're going to be okay. But I must emphasize, we don't have any moving lines, so that might indicate that, in spite of everything I've said with the astrology, that maybe not a great deal is going on. And finally, I want to look at the horoscope of Pete Hegseth. I don't think I'm going to spend very long on Pete Hegseth, but the thing about Pete Hegseth, remember, he's the United States Secretary of Defense, and he's got a secondary title of Secretary of War. Trump likes to be dramatic. Is it the Department of War now? I sort of get confused. And so, the good thing about Pete Hegseth is we do have a time of birth, and we also find that he is in the news. And I have looked at his chart before, so this is a second pass on his horoscope. So turning to Pete Hegseth's horoscope, here it is. He's born on June the 6th, 1980 at 8:28 p.m. Nice exact birth time in Minneapolis. And he's a Gemini. And I think with Pete Hegseth, and I made this point when I first looked at his chart, is that the thing you cannot help noticing, you have to notice the fact that he has the same angles as the United States. So if we compare Hegseth's chart with the United States chart, well, here's the United States' chart. The United States has 12 degrees 21 Sagittarius. I mean, at least using the Sibley chart, this is a chart that most astrologers use, and that Sagittarius rising seems to work quite well. And so having his ascendant, having his angles the same as certainly the ascendant the same as the United States' ascendant, well, you could say that he has a close connection with the United States. If you want to be involved with the United States government, it does help to have a connection with the US chart. It's like George Bush Jr. George Bush Jr., I think he was born on July the 6th, which meant that his son was very close he was born 2 days after Independence Day, and his son is very close to the United States' son. So it kind of gives him a link with the United States that probably helped him in terms of being elected president in the year 2000. And so you could say the same with Hegseth. Now, what stands out about Hegseth, at first sight, aside from the fact that his ascendant is the same as the United States' ascendant, is that Mars-Saturn conjunction. Now, that Mars-Saturn conjunction is wide. It's 8 degrees off. But it still stands out. It's at the top of the chart. And it's, I think one would say that the Mars-Saturn conjunction, they're the two most elevated planets. And they do link with the ascendant, and they link with the fact that he has got Mars he's got Mars and Saturn sort of 8 degrees apart, and it sort of ties in with the fact that he's got Neptune rising. So he was born at the time of a Saturn Neptune square, but also his Mars was square the ascendant, or Mars is square the ascendant. So if you have got Mars square the ascendant and your Mars is at the top of the chart, I mean, from a if you use okay, this is a Placidus chart. This is sort of Mars Saturn in the ninth house. If in this case, I would be tempted to look at it also from a whole sign perspective, because from a whole sign perspective, he's definitely got Mars in the 10th, and also from an equal house perspective, if you use equal houses, his Mars would be just within a degree of a 10th house cusp. So although the Mars is quite a long way from a midheaven, his chart very much has a Mars in the 10th feel to it, and it is about him projecting himself, and perhaps that is about career success. It could be, but Mars is quite a troublesome planet. It can get itself it can get itself into trouble, and if Mars is square the ascendant, that might say something about him. But it's more than that, because if the United States' ascendant is at 12 degrees Sagittarius, that means Hegseth has got his Mars square the United States' ascendant. And so I think that astrologically it was a big mistake to have Hegseth as defense secretary. I mean, from an astrological viewpoint, this is just asking for trouble. Trump has said that he does not want to have wars. He wants to get Nobel Peace Prizes and so forth. With that in mind, you do not select as your defense secretary someone with this chart. This man is trouble, and it's not necessarily his fault. And it may well be we're talking about fate. And when just as a reminder, if you just to give us an idea of the framework we are dealing with, here's a horoscope for Trump's inauguration. So when Trump was inaugurated, Mars was at 24 Cancer, right on the IC. Again, it's not Trump's fault. Whoever elected, if Kamala had been elected, still Mars would be on the IC when she became president. So there's a lot of difficult things going on for the United States, and we've got Uranus moving into Gemini, and that's often a sign of war for America. Last few times, every time Uranus goes into Gemini, United States finds itself at war. War of Independence, Civil War, Second World War. Now it's coming in again. So you do not want to have Pete Hegseth as your Secretary of Defense. Absolutely not. Major mistake. But it seems that they didn't consult astrology when considering whether or not to have Hegseth as a Secretary of Defense. And it's not a partisan point. I think the sooner he goes, the better. I think he is dangerous. And with that Mars square ascendant, you can see his aggressive. You can see his aggression there, and I mean, if you look at some of his quotations, just a few things he said. For example, destroy narco boats and kill the narco terrorists who are poisoning the American people. As I said in my introduction, this destroying of the narco boats is actually making it more likely that the American people are going to be poisoned, because cocaine might be bad, but whatever replaces it, the synthetic drugs like fentanyl, far worse, far deadlier. So in fact, what Hegseth is doing, what the Trump regime is doing, if they really are successful in cutting out plant-based drugs like cocaine and heroin, that means they'll go for something synthetic, and the synthetics are always worse, as we're seeing with the fentanyl epidemic. Tiny amounts of fentanyl can kill you. I mean, amounts which just mind-bogglingly small. I don't know, is it a milligram, less than a milligram, something like that? I think the fatal dose of cyanide is 50 milligrams, and I don't know what a fatal dose of heroin is, but it's not 1 milligram. It's many milligrams. So fentanyl, use of fentanyl is being encouraged by Hegseth and Trump through attacking these narco boats. As I said in the introduction. So he said, destroy narco boats and kill the narco terrorists who are poisoning the American people. Or we have only just begun to kill narco terrorists. If you're working for a designed terrorist organization and you bring drugs into this country in a boat, we will find you and we will sink you. Let there be no doubt about it. I mean, it's kind of amazing. Trump is supposed to be a capitalist. He should know how capitalism works. You can't destroy the market. The market for drugs is always going to exist. And if you destroy the drug boats, you'll just find a replacement. It's already happened. That's one of the reason there's a fentanyl epidemic is because of a war on drugs. It succeeded in one sense. Why bother with importing heroin and cocaine when you can just have tiny amounts of fentanyl, which now they can just send across the border on a drone? It's easy to get it in because it's so deadly. Anyway, but you can see Hegseth's attitude there with some of the things that he has said. And so when you go back to his horoscope, it's not just the fact that he's got Mars square the ascendant. I mean, look at his sun. So Mars and Saturn are 8 degrees apart. So the Mars-Saturn midpoint is 16 Virgo, and he has Sun on his Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so Sun on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, it can be difficult. Sun on the Mars-Saturn midpoint can be about death. It can be someone who is obsessed about death, who maybe even enjoys death, who encourages whoever the admiral is in charge to do that kind of stuff. If you think about it, let's remember what he did. I mean, he sunk this boat, and there were survivors, and the survivors were strafed. So you kind of think that Trump might have the fate of Heinz Wilhelm Eck. So Heinz Wilhelm Eck was a submarine commander who torpedoed a boat and then strafed the survivors, and he was hanged. So here's the horoscope of Heinz Wilhelm Eck. I know we're not talking about Heinz Wilhelm Eck, but he had Sun in Aries. So in the Second World War, it's absolutely established. If you strafe survivors, you in the end you can be hanged. But I somehow don't think that Hegseth is going to be hanged. So going back to his chart, if you look at the midpoints in his, if you look at his 90-degree dial, just to turning to his 90-degree dial, looking at his sun. So there's his sun, and you can see it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It's on his Mercury-Uranus midpoint. I mean, so Mercury-Uranus midpoint, it can be quite verbal. He says things. He's all into this sort of excitement. Mercury, Uranus, Mars, Saturn, spontaneously saying things perhaps about death. And he's also got the Sun on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. And that's a bit dodgy, Sun on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. I mean, getting involved in things that are a bit underhand, which are dodgy, which perhaps even are a bit sort of sleazy. And that may say something about him. I mean, so his sun tree is midpoint tree is quite interesting there. And one thing I did notice about Hegseth is is his nodes. So here is, let's go back to Hegseth's chart. Okay, so there's Hegseth's chart, and if you look at Hegseth, he has his nodes on Uranus. Yeah, exactly. So his nodal axis is at his true node is at I think that's, or is that his mean node? Let me just make sure I've got the right node. I've just switched computers, and I haven't set things up properly. So I just want to make sure that I'm okay, I may not be able to show you this because I'm not. Okay, there should be mean node true. Yeah, it's on. It's a true node, so that's okay. Okay, so that's his true node. So that's okay. So yeah, so he's got Uranus square his nodal axis, and so quite closely square his nodal axis. So that's what he gets involved in. That's his contacts, and so with Pete Hegseth, things just happen, and so it's more evidence that perhaps Pete Hegseth is someone who is quite dangerous. Now, we've just had all these revelations about what happened to the survivors, and the survivors were strafed, or how did it work? They call it a double tap, isn't it? A double tap, you bomb something and then you bomb it again, and it's all come out after the full moon. So there was a full moon on December the 4th. This is when it started to come out, and this full moon was at 13 degrees Gemini, and this full moon was sort of square the nodal axis. And so if you compare this full moon with Hegseth's chart, you can see how important it was. So this full moon was right across his ascendant, also right across America's ascendant, and the north node, the south node, is on his Mars. So the south node, nodal axis on his Mars, maybe his anger and his aggressiveness is coming back to haunt him. Now he's seeing the consequences. Of course, they're doubling down, and of course there is a propaganda campaign. They're saying, oh well, these were all the people killed were on the target list, so it was okay to kill them. So you're getting that. Of course, the reality is that probably they're going for the drug boats as a precursor for trying to get at the whole Maduro regime. So it's not really necessarily about drugs, but that's how it sort of looks on the surface. So the full moon really did hit Hegseth, and if we take this full moon and we relocate the full moon to Caracas, which is the capital of Venezuela, we see that Saturn is exactly on the mid heavens, and Saturn and Neptune, but Saturn in particular is on Venezuela's mid heaven. So it's a difficult full moon for Venezuela, and this full moon perhaps highlights Venezuela issues, and certainly for Hegseth it's highlighted Venezuela issues, not least because this full moon is right across his ascendant. So those are a few thoughts about Pete Hegseth. Sorry, I was a bit brief, but I thought I had to say something about him. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.